Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to AusBooks, where I'm talking about random Australian books I own, and we have a very important author today. We're finally hitting some names you may know, because we're going to be talking about the one and the only Marcus Clarke, and this is his big novel for the term of his natural life. I've talked about this book on the channel before, but it deserves another talk. So let's start. So, who was Marcus Clarke, you may be asking? Well, he was born in 1846. He moved to Australia in 1863 after his dad died, and the dad left him no money. And so he came to Australia, especially Victoria. He worked briefly as a bank clerk and then as a farmer before moving to Melbourne and becoming a journalist for local newspapers. And he wrote in columns. He pretty much wrote everything you could put your hand on. He wrote novels, two novels. He wrote short stories and sketches, non-fiction, essays, like literally everything. And throughout his very short life, because Clarke did have a very short life, he went bankrupt twice. He was never the best when it came to money and all that. And also with the sheer stress that he was living under, because yes, he was locally known in his lifetime, but he never financially was that stable. And with a couple other poor, factors too, like his poor health. He was forced to resign from his journalist job, and he died of a bacterial infection at the age of 35. And that's very short life. And when it comes to a biography of Marcus Clarke, I don't think one's been written, I think, does justice. There is a really, really great book by Michael Wilding here. It's just called Marcus Clarke, and it's a bunch of reflective essays on Clarke, about his writing, about him as a person, putting him in context of the other Australian authors at the time and how Clarke really set up for what Australian writing was going to develop into, especially with the two biggies coming up with Henry Lawson and Banjo Patterson, and how you can see how they kind of built on what Marcus kind of really set up, even compared to some of the other authors who have talked about Australian the identity of Australian fiction really kicks in with Marcus Clarke. And but yeah, he had two novels. His debut was called Long Odds. It was published in 1869, and it reminds me of Anna Karenina, but nowhere near as good, really. I still think it's really solid. It's got horse racing. It's got like a doomed to tragic marriage. There's gambling. It's very fun. But then again, in the mid 1870s, he would publish For the Term of His Natural Life. This is the old version of the Australian Classics edition. As you can see, someone is being flogged right there on the cover. But what's this about? Well, this is about a young man, I forgot his name because it's been a while since I read it, Rufus, and he is charged with a murder he did not commit, and he is sent to Australia. And it's pretty much, again, slice of life, just him following his life when it came to Australia, knowing that he's never going to leave. And it's a very brutal novel. There's tiny glimmers of hope. He finds a love interest, but she has, I think, a brain injury, and so she can't exactly remember him. And it's very sad, and it's a hard novel to talk about because it's kind of just it's similar to Middlemarch in that it's kind of just day to day. It's not much of I think, a plot heavy novel. It's more kind of for the vibes than anything else. But it is a very dark novel. When it comes to what the situations that Rufus finds himself in, very chilling, and I think the greatest Australian novel, especially if you're going, in the 1800s. But you can easily make the case that this is the great Australian novel. Some people would say, Patrick Whiteill, or later on Robbery Under Arms, in terms of like a novel. But For the Term of His Natural Life is definitely, I think, the first genuinely iconic, legendary Australian novel, and a couple other people agreed because Mark Twain really liked Manning Clarke. He said that because he obviously traveled around, and he was like, Australians can't write to save their lives, which is kind of true, especially when it comes to novels. Or, and he said he liked Marcus Clarke, and that if Australia knew what they were doing, they would venerate this author. They would keep him in print forever. They would keep him his legacy alive because he died so young. And that kind of hasn't happened necessarily, because outside of For the Term of His Natural Life, Clarke is like gone pretty much. Again, this is just so famous. It's had some big movie adaptations, but when it comes to everything else, I don't think someone else could name another thing written by Clarke. There is a great volume again written by Michael Wilding. I got my notes here. He done a big like portable Marcus Clarke. I don't have it. It was printed probably 50 years ago, and it's probably the only way you can find a physical edition besides all the vintage editions of anything else written by Marcus Clarke. Literally, I have a couple ebooks of him, but I wouldn't mind finding that if I find it secondhand or whatever. I'm not in a rush to find Marcus Clarke physically, to be honest, because again, he's old as anything. We've got ebooks of him for a reason. But he wrote some very great stuff, to be honest. Again, lots of tales, short stories of the bush. Non-fiction too. He done Old Tales of a Young Country, which is like early Australian history sketches, which are really interesting. Newspaper columns, all that stuff. He also done essays. He done a very interesting essay on Charles Dickens and Balzac, which I think are really good, but good luck finding them. It took me so long to find those essays. And just a very, very solid author, to be honest. And unlike a lot of authors we've talked about so far on AusBooks, very much not just a one book wonder in a lot of ways. Like, there's so much more to read from Marcus Clarke that's just been completely forgotten about, where some of the other authors we talked about I can't really say that for. But this is a fork in the road author. This Marcus Clarke literally changed and defined what Australian writing would become. And it's just so interesting to read. If this man lived a long life, he would gone on to write some, I think, really interesting stuff, but we'll never get that. But yeah, so that's your AusBooks for today. Marcus Clarke, go pick up For the Term of His Natural Life. It is a long book. This is double columned. You're going to do the original. It's got some lovely illustrations if you can find this. It is a very bleak read, but there are glimmers of hope. But it is ultimately just a very sad novel, and just defines what early colonial novels are. And I think it's a really interesting novel. I am due to reread it, to be honest. I probably read it 2 years ago as a reread. I've read this book so many times, but yeah, it's a really good read. I can't recommend it more. But of course, we're going to talk about Robbery Under Arms and all that later on, which are objectively fun at novels. But yeah, so go read some Marcus Clarke, and thank you so much for watching BookTube, and I will see you next time.